Hello,
Hello.
how are you?
I was chatting away to myself on mute. I'm good. How are you?
Amazing.
Good to hear. How's how's everything in Israel?
Everything right on the Eastern Front. All is good.
That is good.
Yep,
Quiet is good.
always, always. No news is good news nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the world seems to be getting crazier and crazier, and just when you think it can't get any crazier, then it gets completely crazier.
Yeah, it's these times when, alternative history fiction and news, they kind of compete on the ridiculousness,
Yeah,
and the news is winning.
yeah, exactly. Who needs fiction?
The fiction is really getting, tough times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but today we are going to talk about some good news about Beam, and in general, this entire space is going to be dedicated to starting from the brief history of Beam privacy and Beam, and going into the upcoming roadmap update, which will be published tomorrow as a draft, as we usually do, to discuss in the community. And by the way, one very important event that happened, not in Beam, but related to Mimblewimble extension blocks, finally live on Litecoin. Did you follow that story?
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to send off a tweet to say that the space has started. I'm very poor at multitasking, but I did catch what you said. The Litecoin Mimblewimble extension blocks are now live, right?
Yep, they are. I think Guy Corem is one of the like major promoters from the Beam side, and David Burkett, who is an amazing developer who worked on that for the last like 2 years, deserves a lot of credit. He's an amazing guy. He was kind of part or like working with Green at some point, and then he developed the extension blocks for Litecoin, and we had a great interview with him. It's on our YouTube channel. Very talented, like amazing developer, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for this work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he worked on Grim Plus Plus for a long time, and this was like the second or an alternative implementation as well as a wallet, and also I want to say like he's an awesome guy as well. He's really cool and really chilled
Absolutely.
and super
Yeah,
friendly and nice.
he did create a parallel implementation in C++. Green is implemented in Rust. And using his implementation, I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
You're back. You're
Yeah.
back.
Um, so I said that he found a very important bug and he got a
Mm,
big bounty, yes, because his implementation it worked differently, and he found that the difference was actually a bug in the original implementation. So yeah, he did a lot of good for both Green and Litecoin, and
absolutely.
Mimblewimble in general. So let's get started with our agenda. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a bit about kind of history, where we were initially, how we got to this point. Um, I think that we can have the mic open, like for everyone to ask any questions throughout this entire discussion, because people might have questions about different topics that we're going to cover. And yeah, just raise your virtual hand, request to speak, and uh, we will the microphone and let you in. So um, let's start from the very beginning. Back in 2018, in March 2018, that was the time when Beam project kind of originally started. And at that time, the Mimblewimble white paper, which was the kind of the first thing that we looked at when we started the implementation of Beam, was already almost 2 years old. it was published in, I think, summer 2016, and then Green was the first project to start working on it and implementing it. And the first idea of Beam was to create easy to use, completely confidential by default cryptocurrency, which would improve on the existing situation on the market. At that time, we had Monero and Zcash, two kind of major players in the privacy coin space back in 2018. And there were also others, kind of less prominent, but Zcash and Monero took completely different approaches to solving this issue of privacy. Just to remind you why this problem even kind of occurred is because even though initially it was believed that the pseudonymous addresses in Bitcoin are good enough to hide kind of the participants in the network transactions, very quickly, especially with the prominence of centralized exchanges that did KYC, it became quite obvious that it's not a very difficult task to monitor the blockchain of Bitcoin, where all the addresses and all the amounts are explicitly written for all eternity, and using network analysis to monitor the transactions and to de-anonymize the users. And there are companies whose like the entire specialty is to do exactly that. And obviously, it was clear that it's not enough if you want to be able to preserve your privacy in Bitcoin transactions or Ethereum transactions for that matter. This existing situation was not good enough. So both Monero and Zcash took completely different approaches. Zcash used zero knowledge, specifically ZK snarks, which is a kind of very specific zero knowledge transaction. Monero used several techniques, including ring signatures and shielded addresses, and combined them together to create the Monero protocol, CryptoNote, I think it's called. And both implementations were very good. Each of them suffered from different types of problems. Zcash had what is called the trusted setup, which means that the initial construction for their zero knowledge proofs was created during this kind of multi-party computation ceremony, after which each of the participants destroyed his secret part that he used to create this shared secret. Monero had a relatively low anonymity set, which is the problem because you want to be hiding in as many other kind of signatures as possible. And both these networks suffered from a bloat because on top of the already large Bitcoin network that in proportion to the amount of transactions, they also added encrypted data and in fact were several times larger in terms of the blockchain size. So Mimblewimble was proposed back in 2016 by an anonymous author. We don't know who this person is. He's obviously a genius, but we don't know his name. And the idea of that Mimblewimble protocol was to create a certain specific mathematical construction that I'm not going to go into, which solved both of these issues together. So it allowed to create completely confidential transactions while at the same time not only not increasing the blockchain size, but actually even reducing it in a way. And it was a brilliant idea. So Beam started from scratch. We basically approached it from blank, editor, so to speak. Beam is not a fork, it's not a clone, it's not a port of any existing solution. We took the white paper as it is and implemented it ourselves from scratch in C++. And in January, on January 3rd, actually, 2019, which was the 10-year anniversary of Bitcoin, we launched the mainnet, default, proof of work, and using at that time modification of the equihash algorithm. Later, we modified it and changed it to Beamhash, which is what we have today, Beamhash 3. It's mineable on GPUs. In terms of the economics, we kind of went the same way as Bitcoin, capped emission, periodic halving every 4 years, except for the first year. And the total cap is 262,800,000 beams. So that's kind of the total amount of beam that will ever exist. The key differences is that the block time is 1 minute instead of 10 minutes in Bitcoin. So on average, we have a block every minute. And that's basically how it started back in 2019. So our goal initially was and still is the best possible privacy, right? So that was kind of the idea of this entire uh, project. Um, and we started, as I mentioned, with the Mimblewimble protocol. However, in time, it was discovered that there are certain attacks that can work, active attacks that can work against the Mimblewimble protocol in this space of trying to establish relation between wallets. So you cannot know who the person is or how much he's sending. But if you do an active kind of sending of several, like multiple transactions to a single wallet, and then you're trying to monitor on the other end some wallet that you know, let's say KYC about, you can try to statistically establish the connection or relation between these two wallets. So in order to fix that issue during our second hard fork, we have also added an additional protocol called Lantos. Lantos was developed for Firo. Back then, it was called Zcoin cryptocurrency, and it uses it today. And the idea of Lantos, which is also a new protocol developed by Aram Jivanyan, who is a cryptographer working with Firo on that project, the idea is to introduce the concept of a shielded pool, where you can basically put one UTXO into the pool and then get a completely new UTXO out while being able to prove using zero knowledge that it's one of the UTXOs that were entered into the pool that you're spending, and thus avoid creating new value or destroying value arbitrarily. The reason we chose Lantos is because the mathematics behind Lantos works very well with Mimblewimble. So we were able to create this kind of hybrid approach called Lantos Mimblewimble. And this is what we're using today. This is the main protocol that powers privacy today. One of the additional benefits we got from introducing Lantos was the ability to create offline transactions. Mimblewimble initially required both wallets to participate in the creation of the transaction. So both wallets had to be online at some time and both sign the transaction in order to make it valid so you can send it to the network. Lantos allows us to create so-called one-side offline transactions. So you can just create an address and then send whenever you want, so similar to Bitcoin in a way. So now both. We have both online Mimblewimble transactions and Lantos offline transactions. And there is one special kind of transaction called max privacy, I will mention in the future, which ensures maximum possible anonymity set. So if you are like completely paranoid and you say, listen, I want to be sure that the maximum achievable anonymity set at that time is enforced, that's when you use this transaction. So obviously, when you are building confidential blockchain, you also need to worry about IP addresses and all kinds of attacks that try to triangulate the origin of the transaction. And so for that reason, we have used Dandelion, which is an additional protocol also developed originally for Bitcoin, and we have modified it a little. And we use it whenever the transaction is sent to the network. It's not directly broadcast, but rather instead it's first passed through a series of nodes, the stem phase of the Dandelion, and then only then it is fluffed and distributed to all the other nodes. So that improves the security on the IP level. And we made the interactive creation of the between wallets very easy by using SBVS, which is an encrypted inter-wallet communication system that allows wallets to communicate between each other. And today we use it for not only creating interactive transactions, but also other purposes, such as broadcast data about atomic swap marketplace and the price of the coins. It's not an oracle, but it's just something that improves the usability of the wallet. So we added several additional kind of mechanisms on top of our basic protocol. Once again, if you have any questions,
We do have one question coming in from Sam Tobacco? Sam Tobacco?
yeah. Hey, Sam.
You may have to unmute yourself.
Your microphone seems to be off. If you click on the mic button at the bottom of the screen, it will be better.
Oh, hey guys, how's it going? Sorry, I didn't realize.
Okay.
No problem.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, just wanted to say hi, and yeah, I really appreciate the spaces that you do, like every week, and yeah, and just wanted to discuss a few things, like about, and I don't know how much has been discussed. I was a little late. I was running late, so yeah, I was thinking about the Beam X token, what's going on with that right now, because yeah.
Yeah, we will get to that.
Mhm.
We're still kind of in the history part, but we will get to this point in really a few minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, so moving on. One of the things that we have invested a lot of efforts early on and continue to invest a lot of efforts right now is usability. And we actually built from scratch very usable UI wallets for all platforms. So we have a desktop wallet for Mac, Linux, and Windows. We have mobile wallets for iOS and Android. And we also have the latest addition to the wallet family, the web wallet, which is an extension for all Chromium-based browsers. And it's very helpful today when we have decentralized applications that we will mention in a minute. And all of these wallets are, in my opinion, very kind of usable and well tested. We have invested a lot of time in that because so many times in our industry, unfortunately, you see products that are kind of more like techy or like less usable, less thought through in terms of the product. So we have really tried and worked hard to make this accessible. It's still techy, all crypto is, but we really made a lot of effort to try to simplify the basic flows, and I hope we succeeded. So if you are interested, you're welcome to go to our downloads page and try them out. And if you see any issues or suggestions, you're welcome to report them back to us. So let me tweet that. Now, using all of these building blocks, we have created a rich ecosystem. We have added a wallet API, so you can take Beam Wallet and integrate it into existing solutions such as payment systems, or build new kind of integrations on top of it, like whatever like is you need in terms of integration with Beam. This API provides. It's used for mining. It's used in exchanges, and it's well documented. So we have all that covered. And currently, Beam is listed on about 35 exchanges, more or less, including Binance. And it's also used in about 300 different stores and services, which allow you to pay in Beam. And we also have live support channel on Telegram, which not many other projects have. So if you have any issue or a problem with Beam Wallet, or something is not working correctly, or you don't know how to do something, you are welcome to contact our support channel, and there's always help there.
We have a question from, or a request to speak from President Ruski.
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? I just wanted to brush up on something you mentioned, which is very critical, I think, and which is where Beam advances itself over any other cryptocurrency that is private, or for the most part, like compared to ZEC and compared to Monero. Because you look at Monero, they had a bloat issue, which they had to. What did they do to Anyways, it was like overbloated, and the size was just getting some ridiculous number. So my question is, do we know the exact like a ratio of Beam's growth in the blockchain against Monero? Like how much faster in gigabytes or terabytes over the year would Beam grow, like 1 to 1 or 1 to 2, 1 to, you know what I mean, XMR in terms of block
Yes.
size?
Yeah. So yeah, we do know the answer. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what I will do is I will dig them up, the most updated ones, and I will tweet them as soon as I get them, probably tomorrow morning. So in terms of UTXO, what's happening is that first of all, there are two different kind of models of growth. So Bitcoin, Monero being fork of Bitcoin in a way, grows as the function of number of transactions, while in Beam, at least theoretically, the blockchain size grows as the function of users, right? Because you can compact all of the UTXOs. In reality, it happens in kind of waves. So there is a wave when a lot of new UTXOs are created. Let's say when the miner does a payout, they take the mining reward and then break it out into a lot of payments to their pool members. And then when these members spend the UTXOs, these UTXOs basically like are combined back, and the total number of UTXOs in the system is reduced. Some of this information, I think, is presented in the Blockchain Explorer. If not, it's definitely in the Community Explorer. We have two, one created officially by Beam and one by a great community member. But in any case, I will do this calculation. I will tweet the comparison. Great question.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. Okay. So moving on. During the course of this 4 years of Beam development, and we're still in the history part, we have managed to develop some features that I would like to talk about today because I feel it cool, unique, and special. And I will start with atomic swaps. Now, atomic swap is the ability to exchange transactions like between, let's say, Bitcoin and Beam, right? You want to send me some Bitcoin and get some Beam in return, but do it in a completely trustless way without any third party that you need to trust, not a centralized exchange or any other intermediary. And the way to achieve that is actually quite complicated because what needs to be done is that the coins need to be locked on their appropriate chain. So Bitcoin needs to be locked on Bitcoin chain and Beam needs to be locked on Beam chain using some specific secret from each side. And then this needs to be exchanged by like separate protocol in order to avoid situation when one user gets the secret and the other one does not. And this is achieved through a mechanism which is called time locks or relative time locks. And in Beam, we have implemented atomic swaps with Bitcoin, Litecoin, and also on the Ethereum side with Ethereum and USDT and several other currencies. And not only that, the mechanism, we also implemented this kind of small marketplace which built into the wallet, the desktop wallet, that allows you to publish your swap offer, how much you want to swap of one currency for some amount of the other currency, in Beam, like in this case, and somebody else can accept this offer. Now, it's not exactly a centralized exchange in the wallet because you cannot break these swaps into parts. So if somebody wants to exchange exactly one Bitcoin, you cannot kind of fill this order by like kind of swapping parts of that Bitcoin. You need to swap for the entire thing. So it's different. It's not a replacement for centralized exchange, but it is an interesting mechanism which does not exist, I think, probably anywhere else. Completely decentralized atomic swap between two completely different blockchains. So this is like the one interesting feature that I'm really proud of that I would like to mention. So we will try to kind of improve on that feature by adding in the future market making bots to the backend of this board, because right now it only depends on the users creating and accepting those offers. In order to make this really work better in terms of liquidity, It probably will be great to have bots doing this kind of market making API for that. So this is one of the goals that we will try to achieve. But from the technological point of view, it's, in my opinion, a great achievement, like kind of the pinnacle of decentralization. No trust required. Very interesting process. It takes time because you do need to wait for some confirmations, especially on the Bitcoin chain, 10 minutes per block, so it takes longer. But on Ethereum, for example, where the block times are really fast, so it works like magic and very quickly. Another great feature that we have and we are using today on Beam, and we are going to use it much more in the coming months, is the confidential assets. So, on Ethereum, you can create new tokens using ERC20 contracts. So basically, you have a smart contract which creates a new token on top of Ethereum, which is not Ethereum. And back in 2017, that was all the buzz. Everybody would create his own token, tell a great story, do an ICO, and we know the rest is history. But in Beam, the key difference between Beam confidential assets and, let's say, Ethereum tokens is that Beam confidential assets do not require smart contracts. They are layer one native citizens of the system, and they are as confidential as Beam itself. So let's say I want to create Alex coin on Beam. All I need to do is run a specific command to the node that is my intention. I need to lock some security deposit. It was back in the day. Now, after this next upcoming 7.0 hard fork, it will be much lower. And I have my own token. I can emit any amount that I want. I can send it to people. And not only is it as confidential as Beam in terms of there are no addresses, all of the amounts are encrypted, but also the type of the token itself is also not. So when you are looking at the transaction, you don't know even what the type of the token is being sent, not to mention the amounts and the addresses. Now, when we have added smart contracts, which I will talk about in a minute, this ability to create new token types and emit tokens was also applied to smart contracts. And this means create, let's say, DeFi applications on Beam, where you can create LP tokens or any kind of new token type. These tokens are also confidential. And it means that all of the transactions with these tokens are as confidential as Beam itself, which is very important and allows us to preserve confidentiality and privacy across the entire kind of different families of decentralized applications, DeFi or otherwise. It even has some interesting use case in NFTs, because as you know, people who collect NFTs seriously, they from one point want to kind of show off part of their collection. From the other point, they don't really want people to be able to use the addresses they saw to deduce the other part of the collection necessarily. And managing that today on Ethereum is very difficult. It requires a lot of effort and sometimes almost impossible. In Beam, for example, you can take the NFT from the contract where it originally resides, convert it to a new unique type of confidential asset, and then store it securely in your wallet. Something like you buy a painting in a gallery and then bring it home and put it in a vault. And then if you want to sell it privately, in some dark corridor to somebody very private, you can do that and nobody will know. So you can do this in NFT world on Beam, and it's not something that can be done in any other chain today. Another kind of
I think this is a very cool aspect of the NFTs on Beam. Obviously, like the privacy as well, and exciting to see more of it. We do have a hand up from Rusky again, and I think it's a question on the atomic swaps, potentially.
Sure. Yeah, actually, it was, and it wasn't. It was actually more or less on the confidential assets. My thing is, how close is Beam, or will we have the ability to wrap, like, let's say, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or anything like that, to be able to use it on the Beam blockchain? So that way it just completely disappears, and then that we can maybe use it in DeFi, whatever, and nobody will ever know how you're making your money, what moves you're making, and none of that. And then when you do it, you just unwrap it and go right back to whatever blockchain you were on.
Absolutely, great question. I think 7 or 8 minutes till that part.
Awesome.
It's coming. It's coming very soon.
Sorry, I'm impatient.
I have a question. Okay. You
Yeah.
said you said Rusky. You said no one can see what you're doing. Is this to do with the IRS?
Well, absolutely not. So here's my thing, right?
Okay,
This is why I love Beam.
just checking.
It's right because it's opt-in auditability, right? Me as as a
Yeah,
businessman, right? Let's say I want to create my own company. I want a representation in like by tokens, smart right or smart contract or whatnot. However, I don't want my competition to know exactly what I'm doing, who are my suppliers, where I'm spending my money on, and I only want to disclose that information with the party that I want to comply with. That's an advantage because if I was a businessman, I wouldn't want anyone, none of my competition, to know what moves I'm making as a company. You know what I mean? And I think that's where Beam will shine.
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So we will get to that whole topic of confidential DeFi in a few minutes, and there are a lot to talk about there. So just to wrap up this part about NFTs, so one of the things we have even today in the NFT gallery is whenever you're buying an NFT, you are doing that using a newly generated public key. So each of your purchases is unlinked from the previous ones. However, since all of these public keys are derivatives of a single kind of private key, you can always prove that you are the owner of several items in your collection whenever you want to. So I think it's kind of the best of both worlds. So you can brag about the collection that you have without at the same time disclosing all the other pieces that you have because they're on different addresses. Okay, so two more things in this unique features, let's say, slide, and let me tweet it while we're at it. The first one is the laser beam. It's not used almost like at all. It only exists in command line version of the wallet, but I still want to mention it because I think it's very interesting. It's basically an implementation of Lightning Network-like direct payment channels. So you can create a direct channel between two wallets, lock some funds in it, and then use this Lightning Network protocol that allows you to move funds very quickly without waiting for the kind of block confirmation time almost instantly. We didn't use this feature, but it is there, and one day I hope we will find where to use it. But it's very cool in terms of implementation. And the last one is the max privacy and the public offline address. So as I said in the beginning, the Lantos protocol allowed us to create offline transactions. And there are two special types of offline transactions that I think few people know about, but they're very interesting. The first one is max privacy, which, as I said, ensures that the maximum anonymity set is achieved before this money can be spent from the shielded pool. Because whenever you send money through Lantos, it's up to the receiver when to take it out. And if attacker can assume that the receiver takes this money out of the pool in close proximity to the moment where they are put into the pool, makes the anonymity, the effective anonymity set smaller. So for max privacy transactions, the receiver wallet waits and ensures that the anonymity set is as large as possible before this money is taken out, and that's protecting this link or lack of link between the sender and the receiver. Public offline address is great for donations because you want to be able to publish one address. However, whoever is sending money to this address is completely anonymous. You obviously publish your address so everybody knows who you are because you collect donations. So you don't want to make that private. So the receiver is private, but the sender is completely protected. And it's very important today in many cases that we see when people do want to certain organizations, but they don't want to expose themselves ever, like in the future or whatever happens, they want to remain anonymous and they don't want to expose the fact that they donated. We do see examples of that happening in Russia and some other places where, for example, some organization was perfectly fine, and then at some point it becomes illegal for some reason, and then people who once donated to that organization are suddenly in trouble, things like that. So public offline address is a great feature exactly for that purpose. Okay, now we finally get to the interesting part, the smart contracts. This is what makes confidential DeFi that we're going to talk about possible. when we were working on the integration of the Lantos, we have noticed one very interesting feature of Nimblewimble. So on Nimblewimble, there is this kind of three parts in each transaction. There are inputs, obviously, there are outputs, but also there is something called the kernel. And it has initially very technical meaning of balancing the blinding factors. However, it's something that remains in the blockchain forever, so it's not removed as the UTXOs, and it's signed by both sides or all sides who created it. And this allowed us to create these interesting modifications such as time locks and later Lantos, basically modifying the transaction and making it more than just transfer of value. You can actually change state of the node using those transactions. And the idea behind smart contracts on Beam was exactly that, to utilize the power of those kernels, expand them, and to create the situation when you are sending a transaction with standard UTXO. However, as a result, you state inside the node, and this state is actually wrapped in a small program, a smart contract, which is running inside the node and makes certain operations or certain additional modifications to the state. So this is how it works. And in a way, it creates this kind of hybrid approach. So you're still UTXO based, like Bitcoin, but at the same time, you're also modifying the state like in Ethereum. So it's kind of the hybrid between the account-based model of Ethereum and the UTXO-based model of Bitcoin today, what we have in Beam. So the Beam virtual machine is implemented in WebAssembly. So it natively runs WebAssembly. And you can implement smart contracts using any language that can be compiled into WebAssembly, which is C++, Rust, Go, and some others. WebAssembly is a well-known industry standard, well-developed, has a lot of tools, which is why we picked it. It's an existing and established technology stack. However, our architecture in terms of smart contracts is completely different from what people are used to in Ethereum, because each contract in Beam has two parts. The first part is the standard kind of smart contract running on chain. However, the second part runs inside the wallet, and it's used as this kind of library which creates these specific transactions that are then used in the by the node to understand what's happening and which functions need to be invoked in the smart contract. And because we have virtual machine the wallet side and on chain, we can create all kinds of interesting kind of architectural decisions and architectural solutions that are not possible on Ethereum. For example, in Beam, you do not pay fees for failed transactions. So the reason it works like that, because whenever you create a transaction, first it runs inside the virtual machine in the wallet side, and it applies it on your local node, and it tries to understand whether this transaction will fail. And if this transaction will fail, it will not be sent. So you probably heard discussed in previous spaces these situations where people participated in some kind of crazy airdrop and wasted millions of dollars on transactions on Ethereum that eventually failed. So that situation will never happen on Beam. So yeah, obviously you can hack the system and send the failed transactions anyway, and then they will be rejected by the nodes, but we have different protection mechanisms for that. But for regular users, if the transaction is not going to pass, it will not be sent from your wallet. And of course, these mechanisms are natively supported in all Beam wallets. So whenever you're running the decentralized application, it actually has small Beam virtual machine running inside of the application directly, even before you get to the node which actually executes it.
This is cool, and I think that like the no cost for failed transactions is going to be huge. I mean, anyone that's used Ethereum for anything like I mean, in 2017 with gas wars, or now with gas wars for NFTs and this kind of stuff, the money that's wasted from like failed transactions is absolutely huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's ridiculous.
We do have one question, I believe, or comment from Haya.
Hi guys, how are you?
Welcome
Great.
back. How are you?
Good.
Great. So first of all, way to go for the smart contract and the DeFi development. my main like issue slash concern is about statistics. So if let's say we are developing a DeFi protocol that I don't know, do loans or credit um, or even swap between tokens. So one of the main, I think, um, core features should be or need to be like the volume and the amount of transactions um, the money is swapped. So will we have any ability to uh,
Yes, I understand your
understand?
question. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about confidentiality within this smart contract um, environment. So first of all, the variables themselves inside the state. Let's say you put you create the most basic contract, which is the vault. You just can put some money in the vault and then get it back, right? So the amount of funds inside the vault, which is in smart contract, is visible on chain. The contract itself is not confidential. What is confidential is your identity when you are sending, and obviously what happens with the funds after you extract it back from the contract. So the state of the contract is visible on chain, and it is also in the Blockchain Explorer once we updated it, and this is actually one of the items that we will see in the roadmap to properly handle the transactions that are sent to the contracts. So you can still measure TVL, you can still measure the amount of transactions that are going, you can still measure activity on specific contracts. What you don't have is you don't have the identities. And in certain cases, like depending on the implementation, you also might encounter, so for example, in the this upcoming update, we enable high frequency transactions. So these transactions are it first handled on the wallet level before they go into the blockchain. So you might need to also monitor mempool if you want to see the full picture.
That's great. That's actually more than I thought I will be able to see. So
Yeah. Yes. So basically, we since Beam is the layer one confidential cryptocurrency, so all of your kind of incoming inputs are confidential. You don't know where they're coming from and who is the owner. However, inside the smart contracts, you do see what is happening, the calculations, the state, and everything. At this point, this is how it works. There are a few ways to do it differently. Secret Network uses secure execution environment, SGX, and you can also use all kinds of homomorphic cryptography tricks, but that's kind of beyond the scope, and we're not doing this right now. Even though we're always welcome to any ideas, and we might research some of that in the future. Okay, so now we get to this kind of what with those smart contracts, and I will start with the BMax because there was already a question about that. What is BMax and what's happening with it? One of the things that Beam has done in the last year is started the move from the existing governance structure of Beam Foundation to a new BMax DAO governance structure. And what it means is that we have created a new token, which is called BMax. And it's a governance token for BMax DAO. So there is a BMax DAO and the BMax token, which is the governance token for the DAO. There is a 100 million total allocation of the BMax token. And it is distributed to some initial investors in the DAO. And there was also a kind of 3 months initial staking program, which was risk-free, and people who staked some amount of Beam received 1% of allocation of the BMX tokens at that period. And then it stopped because the 3 months expired. And now we're waiting for the next step of what is going to happen. And it includes things. First one is the voting, the actual on-chain voting application. It's ready and it's waiting for the 7.0 release, which is happening in the next few days, I hope, probably within a week. And then we will release the on-chain voting application. It will handle all of the kind of important decisions that the DAO needs to make. We usually start on Beam Forum, where we raise some issues, discuss them, kind of preliminary discussions. And then if the DAO decides or the community decides that it's an important thing to vote on, it will be promoted to the online vote. And the online voting process works in a very standard way. We have described it in several Medium articles before, and we will probably update them. Once the voting application is released, there is this kind of voting period. You stake your BMAX to participate in the vote, and then you get the ability to vote on these issues. The other part of the BMAX is basically participation in whatever profits the DAO might accumulate, and these can come from different applications that are supported by the DAO or released directly by Beam. And these applications, let me see if I have the slide here. It's actually 2 slides. But basically, they can be divided into several categories, and I will just mention the categories now, and then we will move on to the 7.0 and what it includes, and then we get to the applications themselves. So we definitely have the NFT gallery, which is a funny story because it started as this kind of Halloween contest. We announced some prizes for the cutest NFTs for Halloween, and we wanted to make this something small and cute, but it became very popular, and the community really wanted to continue and upload more and more NFTs, and that's how it developed. And now we're rolling out the second version. You can mint yourself, and you have a lot more functionality, including IPFS integration. So it's definitely one of the applications that can generate these profits. Another one being the naming system that we're developing. I'll talk a minute, and so on. So all of the applications that are either directly launched by the DAO or are kind of in cooperation with the DAO will generate profit, and this profit will then be distributed to BMX holders. So this is how it's going to work. So now let's talk about the upcoming update, which is really, so the testnet is out already. You can play with it. It's on our website and everywhere else. But let's talk first about the upcoming 7.0 and what it includes. First of all, because of the small delay in testing process and like everything we needed to figure out, there will be tomorrow also an update to the exact fork height. It will be a little bit later than we initially announced. Not because of any problem, but just because we want to allow enough time, including miners and exchanges, to be able to upgrade properly. And key 3 features of this release are, first of all, IPFS integration. IPFS connectivity will be built inside our desktop wallet and all other wallets. And it will allow us to, for example, in case of NFTs, store the NFTs on the IPFS and the metadata on chain, and not the entire NFT on chain like it works today. It also allows us a lot of new interesting projects and integrations in the future. I'm not going to talk about them today, but there are quite a few. Source XYZ is just to mention one, incubated by BMX DAO. The second super major feature of the 7.0 is decentralized app store. And I would like to kind of explain a little bit why this is, in my opinion, so important. In my opinion, one of the majors of a lot of decentralized applications on Ethereum and other blockchains is that eventually when you are going to use this application, you start from a regular centralized website, uniswap.org or whatever you're using. You get to your dApp from a centralized gateway. Not to mention the fact that the MetaMask as a wallet works through Infura, which is the centralized gateway itself. Now, what this means is, first of all, reliability, like if this centralized gateway is down, most of the users will not be able to reach the application because very people know how to create and send transactions on Ethereum themselves without this front end. There is potential for censorship, so you can remove certain pairs, and it's been done from your centralized gateways. So what we've done is created an ability to create a completely decentralized application, packaged and distributed through Beam network. So there is absolutely no URL, website, whatever. You download applications on your hard drive, you access it from your wallet, and it's everything you need to access your online on-chain app. And it's completely anonymous. So this is, in my opinion, a very big deal. And the last important improvement is the high-frequency transactions, which is kind of in-app ability to handle different transaction decisions even before the block is mined. By using the mempool, analyzing it, and structuring it in a certain way as a tree instead of just a list of transactions waiting to be mined, you can avoid waiting for some operation that you can see which transactions are before or after in this pool and make decisions in real time in specific applications and basically save time and make some decisions faster. So these are the three key kind of updates that are being released hopefully this week with the 7.0 hard fork. Any questions about that? Okay, so let me tell you which dApps are basically being released after the 7.0 is out. So what we have here is, first of all, the voting DAO voting application, as I mentioned, the NFT Gallery V2, also very important, very nice. Bridges with Ethereum, going back to the president's question about what and how will it be possible to create wrapped assets on Beam. So this version of Beam Bridges is centralized. Like when I say centralized, like it's all relative, right? If it's not completely decentralized, for me, it's centralized. We do have a design for a completely decentralized bridge, which uses smart contracts on both sides to verify the state. It was quite time consuming to implement, so we decided to start with this kind of simpler version of the bridge, but it still will be possible to lock your assets on Ethereum and then get their representation on Beam and trade it confidentially and move it back when you want it back on Ethereum for whatever purpose. And we also kind of opportunistically decide to create Beam naming service for two reasons. First of all, it's cool. The second, one of the problems with having the .eth name is that now I know everything you're holding. And even if you hold it in a different wallet with quite simple network analysis, I can still know what was there or what you're doing with it. In my opinion, having .eth name is kind of gives a great starting point for whoever wants to untangle your worth or what you're doing with your money. In Beam, obviously, it's going to be completely confidential. So let's say I hold alex.beam or any other name, and you want to send me funds. Once you send me those funds, nobody knows that it's mine, right? It kind of lands somewhere. You know where you send it, but you are the only one. For everyone else, it's just somebody sent something to someone. And the next person who wants to send me funds to the same name will land in a completely different vault. However, I will be able to see everything that I hold, and I will be the only one able to see that, and obviously take it out of the contract and use it. So you do have the name, easy to remember, easy to use. I can send you various confidential assets or tokens or whatever I want while preserving complete privacy. I think it's going to be amazing. In addition to these applications, we are always also working with partners on the DeFi stack, which includes stablecoin, DEX, lending, and other DeFi applications. Those will be distributed by our partners through this decentralized app store. Obviously, everything will be accompanied by the source code and the audit results. So it's going to be kind of the whole package. And this is what's going to happen. Like once we have 7.0 out, these applications will be released one by one. And hopefully in time, we will have this kind of neat ecosystem of confidential DeFi apps. While at the same time, we're also working on the next version, which is the 7.1. Let me drop the slide here and tell you what it includes. So basically, it includes some of the technical debt, things that we wanted to do before but didn't have the time. The first one is the asset swap. So once we have a lot of different confidential assets, you can swap them using a similar mechanism to atomic swaps. Faster because it's on the same chain, and within the same Beam transaction, you can send and receive any amount of different asset types. And it basically allows you to trade tokens not on centralized exchange and not on DEX. It's like something in between. We do need to make a lot of updates to the blockchain explorer. It's very outdated. It was last updated during this confidential asset time and even before we had smart contracts. So as I mentioned, you will be able to see which transactions are sent to the smart contracts, which applications are used. So all of this information that is possible to detect on blockchain should also be definitely visible in the blockchain explorer. And of course, the shader SDK. As much as we love building applications, we want also to create community to build it with us. And the essential step in this process is to create an SDK so anyone can start developing dApps for Beam in their favorite language, whether it's Rust, C++, or Go, or any other language that can be compiled to WASM. So these are upcoming in the next release after the 7.0. And the last thing I want to mention today, before we move to kind of more questions and discussions, is like what's next in the next major release, 8.0, probably towards the end of the year, and it's EVM support. 2 words about that. I really love what we've done in Beam in terms of Beam Virtual Machine, how it works. And I have a lot of criticism for solidity, let's say, as a programming language for EVM. However, we must acknowledge the fact that it's the most popular ecosystem out there, both in terms of applications and developers who have learned the language and the technology stack and are developing applications. And we do not want to miss on that. So we will create EVM support for Beam. And we will probably run it on sidechains, layer 2, similar to Polygon architecture. You have, let's say, some kind of other consensus proof of stake or something similar for speed. And then you have commit points or kind of checkpoints on the main chain for safety. Okay, that's all I have. And now let's talk it over.
I think we may have another question from Sam.
Thank you. So what I'm trying to see here that these days, like the most like biggest chains in like cryptocurrencies and blockchains, they've got stable coins on them, and I know Beam has plans for algorithmic stable coins. So how are they planning to implement it, and how it doesn't turn into another Luna debacle? Just kidding, but like still, you don't want that to happen. And with what would you back it up with? And yeah, just a few details about that, because I know like stable coins, they're like if not the biggest, but they're like they are very important central part of cryptocurrencies right now. Any
Absolutely.
input?
Yes. First of all, the current implementation of the stablecoin that will be launched on Beam by our partners is going to be similar to Liquidity. Are you familiar with that project?
Oh no, sorry. Can you just give me a brief overview? Thank you.
Sure. So, are you familiar with DAO?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. So, MakerDAO is using collateral. So, it's kind of using CDP collateral as debt positions. And Liquidity is using the same approach. The main difference between Liquidity and DAI is the amount of active, let's say, financial decision making that is required. So MakerDAO, they have several parameters that they adjust. One is the collateralization ratio. The other one is the interest rate that they pay on the locked stables. In Liquidity, it's simpler and it does not require as much kind of macro financial intervention. That's the first difference. The second difference is how the auctions are handled when the position goes under the required minimum collateralization ratio. In MakerDAO, they actually make an auction, while in Liquidity, there are two. The first phase, the position can be liquidated by anyone with a premium, obviously. But once the position goes under the red line, like really low, like when it should be liquidated immediately, it is just a kind of spread over all holders, like making all of other existing positions a little bit stronger. So it does not require active auctions. There are benefits to this approach, in my opinion, because, for example, I think it was March last year, there was kind of a major drop. A lot of people couldn't get to the auctions because of the really high fees on Ethereum. So a lot of collateral was kind of sold for pennies. And it's quicker. It's quicker because you don't really need to spend time to have all this auction procedure. So Liquidity is existing project running very well. I really encourage you to take a look into them and how they work. So that's the way that the Beam, like stablecoin on Beam, is probably going to operate.
Thanks. And just a quick question, just very quick. How many developers do we got in Beam? Like, sorry, I like it might be somewhere, but I haven't seen it properly. Kind of. If you can just give me an overview, thank you.
Yeah. So Beam currently has about 25 developers, which includes also QA. Something like that.
Sounds awesome.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question slash like a comment on the stablecoin on Beam, and one thing that at least I expect to see is like obviously the stablecoin that was just mentioned that is very similar to Liquidity running on Ethereum, but I also expect to see like USDT or USDC that are bridged over with the Beam bridges or the third party bridges.
Yes.
And I think this will be very like important for Beam and also for the ecosystem as whole. As you mentioned, Sam, like stablecoins, love it or hate it, they're a huge part of like crypto as we know it today, and I expect that will at least remain like the same like going forward, at least in the foreseeable future. And this is one thing I want to say also is that I expect not like the situation that happened Luna where they went like all in on this one UST stable coin, but I expect like on Beam some experimentation from outside developers, from people playing around, and I expect like some experimentation on developments and protocols that may also be to do with stablecoins, which I think will be very cool. Like obviously maybe cool is not the right word because some people make money, some people lose money, but I'm excited personally to see like some experimentation, both with like the Liquidity coin or the stable coin running on Beam that's kind of mirror Liquidity and other experiments with algo stables and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So first of all, great remark regarding the breach stablecoins. Obviously, they also will be very important. Just like one clarification: when we say liquidity, what we actually mean to say is using design principles similar to liquidity. There is like no relation to the actual liquidity or anything of theirs. It's just easier to say liquidity because that's what the idea is coming from. But just not to offend anyone or on the contrary, to make it clear.
It's like don't be offended, you should be like happy. It's like a praise.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like we have really kind of so personally I am kind of a fan of DAI, and liquidity for me is this kind of very great variation on an amazing protocol. So yeah, I'm a fan.
It's also sad, like at least how I see like the two biggest differences between DAI and Liquidity, which I think are both great, is that Liquidity kind of strips back a lot of the sort of governance and this kind of stuff and almost makes it solely like a revenue generating stable coin without input from the governance token holders and this kind of thing. And it came up in a chat today that I'm in, and someone was talking about Liquidity, and someone said, for those that don't know, at least standing, you can mint like the stable coin, and then you can stake the stable coin in like the backstopping pool kind of thing, and this will buy the liquidations when someone else doesn't liquidate them. And someone commented on it and said that it's kind of like how did they say it? Let me find it. They said it's like programmatically knife catching. So almost like DCAing into the underlying asset.
Yeah, that's completely because the key mechanism is it's called the stability pool. Yeah, and you stake your stables there, and they provide liquidity of kind of last resort when liquidations are required. Yeah, totally, and that's how you farm the token, the profit sharing. Yep, absolutely.
Can we talk a little about also the Beam Treasury? Because I love that concept. People say that it's not a great concept, that you should not be mining and putting in the treasury. But what I've seen, a lot of coins have failed because they didn't have investment later on for developers, for like, implementing their ideas. But I love about the Beam about that. Doesn't matter. They take miners tax or whatever. But it is very important for the investment. But is there a page or somewhere we can see like, what is in there, what's going on, or like, if you can like, maybe design it. Sorry, just I don't want to be sounding rude or something, but just my question, just like, came into my brain, eh?
Yeah. So let me give like a quick overview if some of the people here are not familiar with the concept. So, and then I'll get directly to a question. When Beam raised funds back in 2018, like unlike the prevailing ideas of ICO and other kind of similar concepts back then, we wanted to create long-time kind of incentive alignment between the Beam holders, like investors, the team, and everybody else, which is why we created this treasury model where 20% of each mining block reward for the first 5 years into the treasury. And this treasury is divided into several parts. There's a part for the original investors, for the team, and for the Beam Foundation, which controls the most of the treasury. And this it uses those beams and sells them over time to pay like for development resources and all of that. Now, first of all, in terms of the distribution, how much is distributed right now, you can see it in the Blockchain Explorer. So we have the total amount of Beam mined, and you have the kind of which part, the 20% that goes into the treasury. In terms of the treasury allocation, like how it is spent right now, I'm not sure we have the most updated data. Amir, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, roughly, if you do the calculation, you reach to an understanding that the foundation get, if I round up the number, 70K Beam a month, which is utilized mostly to maintain the protocol and develop it. This is the foundation. I'm talking about the foundation, which is the single largest holder of the treasury, of course. And I think someone just dropped the article on the community.
Can we get a link?
Sure.
I have a follow-up question / comment again. I feel, I preface this with something. I feel very silly asking questions since I'm signed in as the Beam privacy account. I should start to sign in from my personal one. Anyway, the question is, at the moment we have like the treasury model, and as Amir said, the biggest portion of that is going to the foundation. How do you see this shifting to the DAO treasury and like the DAO, the BMX DAO, almost like taking over, I would say, from the treasury model?
I have my ideas. I don't know if we'll manage to do those, but I have a very wild vision of, by the time we'll have the EVM sidechain, I want to kind of wrap it around the message of we can make any dApp which is popular on Ethereum, heavily audited, with a lot of users, with some use cases. I'm talking about Aave, Uniswap, SushiSwap, 1inch, whatever. Just take it and deploy it on Beam sidechain, which is EVM compatible, and maybe also proof of stake. And you'll offer, like, to kind of wrap it around a community funding with a very, very clear message. We take popular application, basically popular dApps, and make it completely censorship resistant, completely private, and kind of play around with the future foundation allocation, which we've been halfway through. So it doesn't have a lot of runway because, as Romanov mentioned, and also the article mentioned, the treasury is only for the first 5 years. So I want to do something. I envision something that we can take this unused allocation and combine it with some BeamXs and to do a meaningful treasury, a meaningful ecosystem funds around making popular application on public blockchain completely censorship resistant on top of Beam. This is how I kind of vision it, but it's a bit far.
Speaking of Beam DAO, is there any information, or actually, no, two things. When BeamX will be listed on any of the exchanges, and also, is there any update on the hardware wallet front?
Romanov, I'm going to leave you the hardware wallet front on the exchange part. Basically, BeamX is a CA, so any exchange that listed Beam can, at any given moment, just change one variable and add or list any Beam CA among other BeamX. Currently, we are not pushing hard toward this direction because we want to have it live, some utility, and then probably we should expect to see exchanges adopting it. I think, in my view, we should be. It should be first tradable upon Beam Wallet in some way, either via app or on a DEX.
Okay.
Yeah. So since Beam is the best kept secret in the privacy coins, pun intended, we do want to reach some volume and some adoption first before we list all exchanges. Regarding the question about the hardware wallet, we have developed the code for Trezor. for Trezor, the latest model, I think, back in the day. But obviously, once again, because of the low market cap of Beam, it is waiting in line way behind many other projects, as you can imagine. Guy Corem is constantly pushing this issue. He's non-relentlessly trying to create like something. We do have a cold wallet solution, but it's not a hardware wallet. One other possible direction to go is to create some kind of hardware like wallet, like something that runs
Yeah,
some
that's what
generic
I was
hardware.
thinking. That's what I was thinking. I'm sorry to interrupt. Like, is there like a realistic possibility of like the Beam Foundation actually creating and designing their own hardware wallet that will support other assets?
Uh, Technically, yes. Practically, it's kind of requires quite a lot of effort from us, which like we don't have capacity for at this time. But it's constantly there, and we already did a lot of work to prepare all the necessary building blocks for that. So I do believe it will happen, but the specific schedule is not known at this point,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
sounds good. Thank you.
And guys, I don't want to sound like a moon boy. Like, just want to like just talk about like a little bit about like the marketing stuff, because like I think I've observed like Beam people don't know much about it yet. Like, and you know what? It works better than most of the protocols that are out there, and it's like not properly marketed, I guess, because like I feel like people don't have knowledge about it yet, and Beam has suffered because of that. And but like in long term, it's gonna do great. But still, just if like a little outlier about that.
The thing about Beam though I like is that they don't care about marketing right now because their work speaks for it all. Just look at their GitHub, look at their progress from like the version 1.0. Now we're about to be 7.0. I see a lot of people complaining about that. My personal opinion is just we don't need marketing yet because if the product is that good, it's gonna speak for itself.
So I would like to comment on both of your remarks. Um, so there is this kind of recurring, let's say, not a problem, but a situation with Beam. So most of the things that we have been developing over the last 4 years are still mostly infrastructure. So during these 4 years, a lot of things has changed in crypto, as you probably know. When we started, it was all about tokens, buying tokens, holding tokens, dumping tokens, pumping tokens, right? So it was like token based, and that's what was about. Like 2 years ago, DeFi exploded, and we have started seeing absolutely amazing. Like in my opinion, AMM based DEX is absolutely genius invention, and all of the protocols that kind of developed around it. Many of them, DAI is one example, but many others are absolutely amazing. And we have also created very quickly, just to understand, the contracts were deployed in a fork exactly 1 year ago. Um, we have created a solution for that. So we do have the ability to run any application on Beam today that can be run on any other blockchain. And now with the IPFS integration, we can also meaningfully support NFTs and many other interesting use cases. But all of these things are still kind of fall under the infrastructure category. In order to become really useful and as a result popular, we do need liquidity. We do need to bring meaningful applications to Beam. And this is what I think is going to be happening right now. So we are almost done with the infrastructure, and most of our development efforts from this point onwards, as you can see in the roadmap, is going towards that. Now, this is the second part where we do need to put a lot of effort into creating SDKs, documentation, which we completely suck at. Like, developers like to write code, they hate to write documentation. But we do need all that. And this is why SDK is explicitly kind of on the roadmap as an important milestone. Because if we will not have an ecosystem of developers building applications on top of Beam, once again, we cannot build everything ourselves. This is also the reason why we're pushing so hard to have EVM compatibility, because after all, yeah, like I believe our architecture is superior and all that, but it's not enough to become popular and gain, attention and attract developers, and as a result, bring more value and more liquidity to the system. So this is what's going to happen. Um, so in terms of like pure marketing, like I don't know, CoinDesk articles or whatever, that's like one thing. But we will put a lot of effort into building welcoming and easy to use developer ecosystem that will allow people to either port existing applications or build new applications on on our system. Today, Beam is the only confidential cryptocurrency in the world which is layer one and has smart contracts. There is no other crypto like that, like anywhere. And what we need to do in this coming months and years is to leverage this advantage of our great technology and to really make it usable, to find the market fit and like the use cases that will be good for everyone involved. So yeah, that's the challenge for sure.
Really, yeah, beautiful words, and like I really agree with you on that one, because like even if there's a like, okay, so every project has problems, and like rather than hiding them, like if we head on, like collide with them and solve them, and that's what I like about this project. And yeah, I really, yeah, agree with you on that one. And before I like disturb more like, I would just like to ask a final question about the speed of the transactions on Beam. Can you just elaborate a little? I think a high frequency transaction. I actually don't. I didn't get the concept what it was about. So if you can just put some light on that, shed some light on that.
Sure. So the native TPS on Beam is about 17 transactions per second, which in terms of like a pure number is similar to current Ethereum 1. However, there are some differences. First of all, on Ethereum, the block is created every 15 seconds, and in Beam, it's 1 minute on average. So it's kind of slower in terms of response time, even though it's the same amount of TPS on average. And the proper solution for like real scalability is sidechains. So we will have sidechains with a different consensus mechanism, which will be faster. Think about like what Polygon is to Ethereum. The TPS, the high frequency transactions are not about like the pure improvement of TPS. They don't actually change the transaction per second number of the mainnet. What they do is they allow specific applications to make decisions faster. The way it works is very simple. It's simple in retrospect. Uh, in most existing implementations, mempool is a list of transactions that are waiting to be mined. And the miners select the most profitable transactions in terms of fees and mine those transactions into the next block. High frequency transaction changes the structure of the mempool from a simple list into a tree. And in this tree, when you are sending a transaction, you can specify conditions on which transactions exactly you want your transaction to be before or after. And this means that instead of selecting just a list of transactions to mine, the miner actually selects a branch in this tree. And obviously, the miner selects the most profitable branch. So all other branches kind of are fall aside. But what you achieve in this architecture is that you can be sure that if your transaction is mined, it will be mined in a specific order that you specified. Example of use case, for example, you want to buy an NFT in an auction, and somebody else is bidding higher amount of the same NFT that you want to buy. So instead of sending your transaction waiting for like 1 minute on average to understand that you lost in this bid, you will be able to see that transaction in the mempool, and you will be able to say, oh, I want this piece, so I will raise my stakes and I will put my transaction before that one, even before the block is mined. So a lot of the decision making in DeFi applications, and the same example can be applied to, for example, to liquidations. You want to liquidate certain position with a profit to you, but there is another transaction that you compete with, which does the same liquidation of the same position, right? And you see that, so you say, okay, I will not be able to liquidate that position. I will go to try to liquidate another one. And you will be able to make this decision even before the block is mined. That's the idea behind high frequency transactions. Does it make any sense?
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. I now it does actually it does. But yeah, so like on the layer one, like so we don't have any solution, or are we working? Maybe we might work for the like the speed of transactions because like yeah, I understand the sidechain concept thingy, but like just like for example Solana and all those they have like what 50,000 or something. I know they're like not practical. I think they're just saying it in the like the lab. You can get like whatever speed, but like yeah, in real life it's totally different, right?
Um, so I actually think the Solana is one of the fastest out there in terms of capacity. There are problems which I will not go into that include, the number of validators and how decentralized they are and all that. Beam main chain is going to remain proof of work, like for now, for the foreseeable future. However, there are several different approaches that we can take. The first is, and it was suggested also like by Guy Corem, the idea to take DAG approach, decentralized acyclic graph, which creates kind of a lot of coexisting branches at the same time and increases TPS that way. This is an interesting solution. Um, there are some interesting forms of sharding that. Um, what Amir? What was the name of that project that I really liked? I forgot.
Which one?
No,
Cadena.
Cadena. Cadena is the proof of work chain that scales horizontally. So it's like you have a lot of kind of side chains running simultaneously and mining across them. So it's kind of sharding, but it's implemented very well. So this is an approach we also are looking at. It's very interesting. So this is kind of the actual changing of the mining structure, right? Of how Beam's miner ecosystem exists. So this is the first direction. The second direction is layer two and sidechains. We are definitely working on that. Sidechains, in my opinion, will definitely exist. Like we will make them happen. Regarding the changes to Beam mainnet layer one, I'm still not sure exactly what will be done and when.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. And actually, like with like I know it's like a Dino coin, but Litecoin is also going towards Mimblewimble, and Mimblewimble is coming into the mainstream, and they're actually implementing the sidechain kind of like version of Mimblewimble, right?
What
Already good one.
Litecoin has done, and we have talked about it a little bit in the beginning of the episode because it just happened this week. They did it in the form of extension blocks. So they call it Mimblewimble extension blocks. And it's kind of big news for Mimblewimble community this week because after a lot of time in development and testing, it's finally live on their mainnet. But it's different. It does not change the consensus layers. It's like the same Litecoin, only now you can send an additional type of transactions.
Yeah, understood.
I have one comment which is very opinionated and is just my own opinion. I think that like with any of these layer one chains that are promising like however many thousand transactions per second, it'll never be enough and it will face issues like that Solana has seen recently with like downtime and having to shut off and turn back on and this kind of stuff. And I think that due to this, every like successful layer one chain will require side chains for like heavy throughput, especially with stuff like dexes and this kind of thing. And before anyone replies to my opinionated comment, I have a question coming in from Telegram from Joe. And I think this is a really interesting question. At first, I didn't understand it and thought it's impossible, but after reading it again, I think it's kind of interesting and fascinating. The question is, will there be a time when I can wield an Ethereum address through Beam? And the follow-up is where I can stake an ERC20 token on an Ethereum dApp through Beam, for example.
So it's a great question, and it actually has two parts. The first part is about wielding an Ethereum address on Beam. So basically, what is it like? With current technology, Beam has no problem emulating Ethereum addresses, and this is what we have done in this kind of demo that we created, and I promised to release a video about and didn't, of how we can connect MetaMask directly to Beam. To Beam chain, use like MetaMask to create transactions on Beam. The way it works is basically MetaMask signs transactions using the Ethereum schema, which involves ECDSA, which is the version of cryptography and the hashing functions that are used on Ethereum. And obviously, we can emulate them on Beam. So you can create an environment that will look from the outside very similar to Ethereum, but everything will be actually running inside Beam contracts. We are going to use this approach for improving usability of certain applications that are, let's say, require less confidentiality and more kind of about being like easily accessible and usable. And we do have examples of such. And this is possible. So yeah, you can take MetaMask with an existing Ethereum address and create just like you would on Polygon, on any other EVM chain. You have the same address, and you're using it exactly the same. Even before we implement EVM on Beam, you can do something like that. But the other part is much more difficult because when you are talking about working with tokens on different chains, this like it gets more difficult. And the reason for that is synchronization between different blockchains. Even if in bridges, when we talk about simple bridge, right? Very simple kind of centralized bridge, you lock tokens on one chain and you get rep representation of these tokens on another chain. You need to take care, you need to think about a lot of things. First of all, rollbacks, rare they are on bigger chains, but like on smaller chains, they're not as rare. And also all kinds of hacks, tricks, like what happens if somehow, for some reason, doesn't matter what the reason is, the tokens become unlocked on the original chain. What happens on the chain that currently holds this mirror wrapped representation of these tokens? It's not a simple thing to do. So this is the most difficult part, the second one. Yeah. So yeah, you can use the same address, but not as simply, just stake some token on Ethereum and then do something with this representation on Beam. That's much more difficult to handle. I hope this answers the question.
And this kind of comes back to some views that have been shared about like cross-chain versus like multi-chain. And I think this is the reasoning. Like if you're doing sorry, I have some alarm going on. If you're doing like cross-chain stuff, then your like security assumptions are vastly different than if you're acting like within an ecosystem or within a chain or this kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. But on the other side, look, we see growing demand for these kinds of solutions. And the reason for that is because when you DeFi gets, it gets bigger, it gets smarter, you have more competition, and the margins are getting thinner. So you need to be able to use any advantage that you can get. And in today's world, being able to quickly move assets between the chains and explore opportunities, as they come, wherever they are, right? You can't afford, like if you're a DeFi trader today, you can't afford to say, "Oh, I'm only trading on Polygon. I don't care about Solana." That's not how it works. You need to find opportunities wherever they are. So there is a huge demand for cross-chain DeFi, and it's growing. So yeah, and I'm sure that the solutions will continue developing. We see that bridges today are one of the weakest points because they're kind of immediate targets, right? It's the place where all of the liquidity moved from chain A to chain B resides. So they are most often attacked. So yeah, we need good solutions for bridges, and we need great solutions for being able to move liquidity from one chain to another, and it is definitely a big challenge. Time flies when you talk about Beam.
Absolutely. I have a follow-up question that's kind of related. Would there be some situations where what Joe mentioned or asked would be relevant? And I give like one specific example. If there was like not a public bridge, so to speak, but if there was a DAO, for example, and they wanted to do stuff on Ethereum, but they didn't want all of their decisions and this kind of stuff to be public on the Ethereum network, would they be able to do, or is there a possibility where they could do the on-chain kind of governance stuff on Beam, and then for example, the funds were sent in another place?
Yes,
if that makes sense.
absolutely, it does. And yes, it's a great question. So this is actually an amazing use case for Beam. Let me explain like why. First of all, you can easily have a completely confidential governance framework where you vote and the votes are confidential, like they should be, I think, in many cases. And you can also do all kinds of additional tasks, which are then breached. The results of those votes and the results of these tasks are breached to the original network. And if they don't hold like major intrinsic monetary value, this is a no-brainer. This is an amazing use case, right? Because even if the breach is okay, so you might cast the vote again or something like gets out of sync for a while, but you don't actually lose funds because there is nothing to steal, but you do enjoy confidence in these specific types of applications. Yes, it's an amazing use case. Having your platform on chain, on Beam, completely confidential for any DAO activities, absolutely. This is
Very
actually a
cool.
good direction. Yeah, a good direction to push for in terms of adoption by other DAOs that like, want to hold confidential voting. Absolutely.
And this goes back to what President Rusky was saying, like as an individual, but also as like entities, you don't want your competition or like the people you're playing against or to sort of have the information that in like traditional markets is insider trading and leads to Nancy Pelosi being the most successful stock trader. You don't want that situation for like your own personal information and leading to like front running and this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so, so you can use the applications that allow you to connect both, let's say, MetaMask and Beam Wallet or just MetaMask, and then simultaneously work on two chains without like you even thinking about it, right? So all of this stuff that requires confidentiality is done on Beam seamlessly, like behind the scenes, and then the decision making, the actual funds like are transferred on some other chain, let's say Ethereum or whatever. Yeah, you can create this kind of hybrid multi-chain applications where one front end is actually working with several different chains behind. I think it's a great architecture to implement.
That is all the questions I have. Do we have any more questions from the crowd?
If not, I just want to mention that you can always send us questions via Twitter, Telegram, email, or just shout them very, very loud.
Absolutely, yeah. Ping us. Don't, whatever you to be afraid to annoy us. And if you need to like at someone, at anyone, no problem. The one thing I want to mention also that we mentioned at the start, and I'll bring it up again, at the moment we are kind of fleshing out the kind of how the Beam name service will work on Beam. One of the key aspects of that is that we want a new name. So if you have any ideas of good names for the BNS, which is like Ethereum name service, but you will have like a Beam vanity address, jump into the forum, which is forum.beam.mw, and let us know your thoughts. There's a good discussion going on, and if you haven't already, be sure to check it out.
What's the history of Beam? Like, who came? Like, okay, so how did it all start with an idea? I know, but like, where? And like, just a few more details.
This was the discussion that took place right before you arrived, I believe.
As usual, it was an unbelievable sequence of pure coincidences. Nothing was planned. It was just, an amazing twist of fate, fortune, and all the rest.
That's how it should be, right?
Yeah. Just like, we did talk about it at the beginning, so you can listen to the recording, and we kind of described how it started. But just since you asked, like a couple of fun facts about me personally. So it was my first project in this crypto space, and I didn't know like anything about any blockchains or whatever. And I didn't even hold any other cryptocurrency, even not even Bitcoin. And the first cryptocurrency I actually had was Beam.
Nice.
Yeah, few people know this, but when we were having like early rounds with initial investors, like somebody asked me what I'm investing in, and I said like I don't even hold Bitcoin, and he was very surprised. And then the guys told me, listen, maybe don't put on that too much, just change the subject. Or, yeah.
Don't tell anyone. Do you
Don't
own
tell anyone.
Bitcoin? Do you own Bitcoin now?
Yeah, but it was the first crypto project for both for me and like also for most of the team. We often joke that if we would like apply for a job in this space, we would not be hired because lack of experience. But in retrospective, it worked very well. We did a lot of great things very quickly and continue to enjoy the project, like definitely the most enjoyable and interesting project in my life.
Mm.
And
So
we enjoy it a lot.
you're like the Beam Satoshi version.
Something like that.
Good, good. So I think just like just for my own, like I don't know why I'm curious, but you're from Israel, right?
Yes, I'm from Israel.
Beautiful, beautiful.
You are the first person who I know who didn't invest in Bitcoin.
I'm sorry?
I am saying you are the first person I know who didn't invest in Bitcoin.
Okay. Nice to be the first.
Okay, my question was, is there going to be a direct bridge to Polygon?
Yes, we will start with the bridge to Ethereum, but in terms of the architecture and the implementation, it can be bridged to, I think, any EVM-based chain very, very simply.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
And soon in future, can we have a Beam event where like people from all around the world, just like Bitcoin events, come up all the time, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, so back before the COVID days, we did have some events, but today it's mostly online, both because of the convenience and it's simpler. But yeah, it's definitely possible. I think there are some recordings somewhere of him somewhere on stage and saying something, but it was like far ago in a galaxy far away. Okay, so it's been a great time. Thank you very much for joining in and asking amazing questions. And the official update regarding the roadmap will be published tomorrow in the newsletter and also on Twitter and everywhere else. And so far, have a great time of day wherever you are. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you all, and see you next week, same place, same time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.